So tell me like how. Tell me a little bit about your background then. So, obviously, I know you're Guyanese, right? Well, I'm Guyanese as well.
Yeah.
But how, from when you were little, what can you remember about the place?
So, oh my gosh, so little memories is humidity. So I was born in Guyana, but moved to the UK when I was 1. Went back when I was around 7. And the thing I always remember, and it happens now, if you get on a plane where there isn't a walkway, so you have to, the door opens straight onto the tarmac, there's a burst of humidity that just hits you. Humidity and like this stagnant stench of the sugarcane fields, because it's not far from sugar and rice, and they stink. But that's home, like that smell is home, so I always remember that. And then also going to school, so I went to primary school for 1 year in Guyana.
All right. Which school did you go to?
I went to Sacred Heart, so it was on Main Street. It's not there anymore.
Oh, right.
And I was preparing for what was a common entrance exam, and one of my abiding memories about school in Guyana was sitting in the front row and someone being beaten in front of me on like day 2, being bent over the desk and whipped.
Oh.
And I was from London, so, where they don't hit children.
Yeah.
It's all very civilized.
Yeah.
And that put the fear of God into me.
Oh, gosh.
To be honest.
Yeah.
And also, I think what was unfair, deeply unfair, was just our sense of justice in Guyana. So I remember all of those names, we've got Dutch names that we normalize, but how to spell them, you learn to spell them quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it was a class of about 70 children. Everyone stands up and you spell your word, and then you get to sit down. And there are 3 rounds, and if you're still standing at the end of round 3, you get beaten.
Yeah.
And I got to sit down in round 1, obviously. But then I laughed at someone, and so I got beaten anyway.
Oh,
Because it wasn't fair to laugh at people. So you learn a lot of camaraderie, I think, and teamwork, even through those shared experiences.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. I've got some really, really vivid memories of like it kind of going around the houses, like exactly like what you said. So you'd have to stand up, and then afterwards, you do your you'd have to give your answers, etc. And if you didn't get it right, like by the time number 3, something would happen to you. So and there was no, like, you couldn't say I don't know. You couldn't say that. So so it just caused everybody to I guess kind of find out immediately, because the first time it happens to you, you're like, no way, I'm definitely going to make sure that I know this for next time. And it probably caused you to hustle as well. Talking about the hustle thing, you had to do it for yourself. Nobody could do it for you.
Yeah, and there's also the funny thing of, I think of the Harry Potter sorting hat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we went through, a traumatic version of the sorted hat.
Yeah.
Can you spell or can you not spell?
Yeah.
And that's what I think is fascinating about our culture is your whole life outcome is actually decided when you're 11.
Yeah.
When you do that common entrance exam.
Yeah.
Because if you're lucky like us, work hard, go to the best school, your whole life is set, especially if you stay in Guyana, because you'll work in the bank or the government, your career is genuinely set just by being alumni. You don't even have to do as well in your exams just because you've rubbed shoulders and nepotism and all of that.
Yeah.
It's I love it, but why wouldn't I? Because I benefit from that privilege.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine what it's like to not benefit from that privilege.
It's true. I remember, especially about the common entrance, right? Everybody wanted you to get first place in it. Yeah. Not even and don't forget there's thousands, maybe thousands of kids. But the idea is that you would get to number 1. And it was never I want to be in the top 100 or whatever. I want to be number 1. So I think when I did it, I was number 11 or 20 something or something like that. I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted that I was in first place. And everybody was like, oh, this person had got number 1, etc. And I was I was kicking myself. Imagine that.
But But that is also our parents, because I remember you start studying for common entrance in April. April or May, you start studying for the following, so you've got a full year. And I moved back in common entrance year in September.
Right.
So I started studying in September. Everyone had an almost 6 month, we call it ADGE. So because you're here, I'm like ADGE, which is a Guyanese word for Head Start.
Yeah.
And my dad, when it came to choosing schools, he just put Queen's College. And I said, there's 2 other options. And so he's like, okay, Queen's College, Queen's College, Queen's College. So not to put the pressure on me, really, with 6 months to go. And I did make it to Queen's College, but that level of pressure is quite significant
as
well.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about, like, you've come back, you've done your common entrance exam, and then afterwards you come back to the UK?
Yeah, so I came back to the UK. So my dad enrolled me in Queen's College, but just to secure a place. But then I came back to the UK for 2 years, and that switch of culture was really interesting, because I remember being in a history class in the UK, talking about Christopher Columbus. And like, he discovered South America.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. There's me. Hands up. No, he didn't. You can't discover something that has already been inhabited. That's not true. I think you find there were Amerindian people there. So then I go on, like, teaching the little bit of history I'd learned for common entrance to the history teacher, who did not enjoy that experience and threw me out for being disruptive.
Oh, really?
But the thing, I was always lucky. My mum and dad really advocated for me. So my mum was the one in the UK at the time, straight to the school. I'm not doing detention. She's not going to be punished for this. Your teachers need to be more resilient and understand world history. End of conversation. We are leaving now. But that cultural difference is what's really interesting. How, I guess that was my first taste of how colonialism is a different story, right? Your history is wherever your vantage point is. And that's not necessarily the truth. It's just a vantage point. So that, I think, made me more curious and maybe more challenging.
Got it. And it's true. I mean, like, you could look perspective-wise, even, it's something that looks like a sphere, but to somebody else it's a circle, right?
Look at all of the social media things with, like, the blue dress, or was it the white dress? I still don't understand how that's possible for us to see different things, but I think perspective is really interesting.
Definitely. So you come back to the UK, you go to, like, school here and so on. And how does that work with you going back to Guyana? Wow.
So that was just my parents.
Yeah.
Really looking at different economic opportunities. Guyana's got such easy barriers, like no barriers of entry for business, to be honest. I'm not even sure there are child labour laws, because I was working in my dad's Cambio at age 10.
Right.
So I'm not even sure there's a clear child labour law.
Yeah.
And so my mum moved back and opened her business. My dad had been home. And so she moved back and opened a successful catering business, and it just made sense for the family to be in Guyana.
Right.
Also, it's because she had this whole thing about teenage pregnancy.
Right.
Like, I think there was a lot more media coverage of it. So she was determined that in Guyana she could create the life where she's working from home largely, and there's just no time. We had a specific time. She tested how long it took to travel from school to home by all modes of transport. Wow. We had a clear line about what time we had to get home.
So you had your Google Maps already back then. The time that it would take you to get from A to B. Wow. My gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I used to get pulled up as well, because I would jump on a bike with my best friend Rob, and he would give me is that a backie or whatever you call it? Right, give me a tow. And we cycle all the way through the streets and then drop me off at home. But if I didn't get back in a certain time, my aunt would kick up a fuss. And obviously back then, no mobile phones, right? So, yeah.
Which is strange now for me to think, like, on Mashomani and Easter, we would go to the seawall quite young. So at 13, we'd just be like, hi, we're going out with the rental guidance with no mobile phones, and yet we always found each other. I'm
I don't know.
fascinated by that now. That no mobile phone, and yet you find your friends.
Yeah.
It's a different world.
Oh gosh, I remember that for sure. Okay, cool. So you come back to Guyana, or you go back to Guyana, and then afterwards you go into school. How was it again? A bit of a culture shock to go back and see things again differently.
It was, and what was fun was I left the UK in March, and I didn't start in Queen's College until September. So I read nearly every book on my dad's shelf during that time. And that was, I mean, imagine just this young child reading. I'm reading my mum's Maya Angelou books. I'm reading my dad had Malcolm X. I read that cover to cover. Flicked through the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. Didn't actually engage too much in that one. But just reading, kind of running my own curriculum, what's interesting, let me read, that I think really shaped who I am today as well, because that passion and curiosity for different perspectives. And then joining QC in Queen's College in September, walking in and people were like, it's a fat girl from London. And because there's no filter, so it's like, there's a fat girl from London. And then they said to another girl, she's fat like you two can be friends.
Oh my God.
Like, what on earth? Now, there'd probably be like hate speech.
I know.
Political
It would be
correctness.
in the national newspapers.
But what was weird, that girl and I had birthdays which is just one day apart, which seemed to cement for people that we should be friends.
You need to be friends. Oh God.
So it was a culture shock, but I think I fit in quite quickly.
Yeah. I think you did.
Comparatively.
From what I can remember, it was just like lots of people were hanging around near you or around you, and I was like, oh, okay. Right, so must be something about this girl.
I used to curse, so I remember, and I still have a mouth like a sailor, and that was very countercultural in Guyana for a young woman to speak in such a coarse way. So I think that was one of the things that made me a bit of a curiosity why people come and talk to me, and they'd come and say something bad.
Yeah.
In your English accent, say something bad, and then I would just be effing and blinded, because why not?
Oh my God, that is so funny. I know, and that's the weirdest thing about Guyana, is because it's like anything that's out of the ordinary is, like you said, a curiosity, and it's just kind of, it's because they're not necessarily exposed to all the other things. I guess now though, with the internet and all of that, like things are a lot more mainstream, for want of a better word. Like,
been exciting.
Yeah.
These days.
We would not exactly.
Well, they're saying that. I remember capitalizing on it in sixth form. And I remembered this story a couple of weeks ago, and I cringed, because times have changed, political correctness, cultural awareness, doing what I do. I'm a specialist in diversity and inclusion, and this story just hit me that in sixth form, we did the school newspaper, and I wanted to, make it exciting, run a competition, always been a bit edgy. And so I ran a competition that you'd get a prize if you could bring the, what was it? I think I said it was a Vietnamese or Korean exchange student. If you could find them, you bring them to the prefect room, you get a prize.
Yeah.
They didn't exist. So any child that looked even vaguely Vietnamese or Korean got dragged to the prefect room.
Right.
For 2 weeks, like competition was running, and I just laughed. For the whole 2 weeks, that was just my entertainment.
Yeah.
2 weeks. But now, how horrific.
I know, it's just, it's one of those things that just wouldn't happen nowadays, would it? Oh gosh. So, you're in QC, and all these funny things start happening to you and whatnot. When did you come back over? What?
So I came back when I was 18 after I finished my A-levels.
Right. And moving from QC up to A levels. Did you do the A levels at QC?
Yes, so I did UK A levels with in QC.
Uh-huh.
And it's, when you talk about wanting to be top 10, I was in the top 10 for CXC, which is the GCS equivalent. And then I was the first girl in QC to get an A in accountancy. I think I was the first girl in the country to get an A in accountancy at A level.
Wow.
And so there's something about those stories. And, I went back and found, like, if you go to 1996, the Guyana Chronicle, I'm on the front page with a few of our classmates as well, because we were the top group in the country.
Yeah.
And when you tell people stories like that, when people say, why are you so confident? It's like, why wouldn't I be?
Yeah.
Growing up in that kind of society where, fundraising, you go to, my godfather ran one of the banks, and my dad had established a bank, and then alumni is the police commissioner, and you're just walking up to these people, arranging with their office to have a meeting. You're 15 or 16 and having a meeting with the police commissioner, like, that's completely normal. So it gives you this foundation of just being unstoppable no matter where you go in the world.
Yeah, no doors.
Yeah, there's no walls either. There's just no barrier.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. I try and instill it in my team today as well. I say to them, look, there are literally no doors, and therefore there are no keys that you need in order to open any. Right? Just think for yourself and just make sure that you just walk right through, like, swagging. And
I'm trying to teach my daughter that. We're working on, like, how to walk. I'm like, walk with your head high. Have a song in your head that you walk to.
Yeah.
But I think it's disconcerting in this society. I remember doing a podcast episode and someone said, what's the plan, Roianne? And I was like, I want it all.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's not on the table that if I want it, I'm going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people find that super disconcerting.
Yeah.
Especially for a black woman.
Yeah.
Because I think there's all the preconceptions about what you should be and what the comparisons are, but I'm Guyanese, and that just transcends every other thing.
Love it. Oh my gosh. So you finish your A levels and you come back over here. Well, what happens then? Yeah.
What happens then is I find out that according to UK law, if you're not here on your 16th birthday, you have to pay foreign fees to university, which are significantly higher than domestic fees.
Right.
So, and I hated it here. To be clear, I came back to the UK kicking and screaming.
Right.
It was just like, got completely drunk the night before I was supposed to fly, like drinking contraband alcohol, used shots of contraband alcohol, trying to, like, invoke some kind of illness so I would miss my flight.
Really?
Came back here and couldn't go to university because the price was just astronomical. So started to look for a job, and I was just deeply unhappy. No network, no way to really connect with home. It's not like now WhatsApp calls. My friends in Guyana, we talk all the time. As we know, we've got our alumni WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Jokes. There's no barriers or boundaries to our communication. It wasn't like that. And I was so unhappy. And finally, my parents said, okay, if you have not got a job by December the 31st, go home and enroll in university in Guyana for the January intake. And I was so happy. I was skipping through the streets of South London. My mum told me to do a job interview, so I went. I didn't try very hard. And I remember job interview was the 11th of December. On the 19th, which is my birthday, I get the news that I got the job. And I was this close because I just had till the 31st. And that changed my whole trajectory. Then I started working from the 11th of January, counting down to when I would go to university, because the plan was, okay, I'll just do my stint, my 3-year stint. That's what you have to do before you get domestic fees. Then I'll go to uni.
Yeah.
But you start earning money,
Yeah.
and then it just becomes less attractive to leave that to go to university.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the day that I stopped ticking off the calendar, because I was literally like, just one more day, I need this job. And then I started to embrace work. was really interesting.
Yeah.
Working for the government, the UK government, learning so much and starting when you're 19. So that is one thing I say, if people don't know what they want to do, working for the government is a playground of skills, because it's all competence-based, so you can switch. I did finance, I did, civil justice, I did customer service, I did training and facilitation. I did so much policy. I've been a communications advisor. So it gives you a really good footing. And then I did evening study, horrific. Because I think the one thing I'll say to everyone is, it's a con. You sign up for evening classes in the summer when everything looks wonderful.
Yeah.
The sun is shining. Doesn't feel that exciting in November.
Nope.
As the nights get colder. And I remember trying to hotfoot it from central London to South London to get to uni in the night. And thankfully I had long hair at the time. I would be asleep in lectures and using my hair to cover the fact that I was actually asleep. And top tip for anyone is say something. Say something very early in a lecture. If you plan to have a nap, say something insightful or ask a detailed question in the first 10 minutes, and it gives you the rest of the lecture to sleep, because you have proved that you were there.
Brilliant. I love that. Top tip for anyone who's looking at this. Yeah, make sure you do that, right? Okay, so you're at uni and you're at night classes and so on, and then presumably you're doing this alongside while you're working as well and everything else, right?
And I dropped out and then went back years later. But what the power of the Queen's College network is, I walk into enrollment and I had my Queen's College ring on. And the lecturer enrolling me says to me, "That ring?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's where I used to go to school." And he said, "Hold on." So he goes back to my application. He said, "I went to Queen's College."
Really?
And he ended up being one of my lecturers, ended up keeping in touch with him over the years, kind of very mentoring whenever I saw him. But that's the power of the network. Who knew I'd walk into a space and he helped me with all the forms, all the processes and everything.
Wow. And that's the other thing as well. I think people don't necessarily understand that you don't need to go to necessarily a college or school or whatever to build a network. You can start today.
Yes.
That's the key thing, is just be involved with the other person and just, literally pay attention and just follow them and make sure that you're not necessarily shadow. I don't want to say it's what's the word?
Not stalking.
Not stalkery, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you give back as well, whatever is being given to you. So, offer to do things like, is there something that you need to do in work or whatever? So, yeah.
And also, I mean, this is slightly inappropriate, but top tip, don't be an arsehole. Because I remember, so I worked in government, so did my mum. I left government, went to work in the charitable sector, and I'm in a meeting talking about second chances for young people who've got into trouble, for young people who've lost their way. How do you give them second chances? And I'm talking to two women who run fantastic organisations to give people second chances. And one of the women talks about how she was inspired by her nephew's story. Her nephew had dropped out of college unbeknownst to them because he was being bullied, potentially at risk of death, going down a really bad path. Had kind of confessed he wasn't at college anymore, and they'd helped him get a job in government. And these two older black women had taken him under their wing, kind of mothered him because he was quite young. And, at this point, he's now ready to get married, has had a couple of promotions. And I'm listening to the story, and I said, "Remind me where your nephew worked." And they said, "The Ministry of Justice." And I said, "Your nephew's name is Sean, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is." "How do you know that?" "Well, my mum's one of the older black women." So I've always remembered my mum had Sean was on her team, and I'd met Sean. Now, the odds of me meeting Sean's aunt and sharing all this information were so slim. But guess what? What if I'd been horrible to her or Sean had been horrible to my mum. Like all of those people in that story could have changed the trajectory of that story by being negative or rude or dismissive, because sometimes we don't know when karma's gonna come knocking.
Yeah.
So I think that's such an important life lesson, is think really carefully before you misbehave.
Yeah, yeah. And that's very, very true. I mean, that for the connections that you have in your network, it is like if you introduce that virus of not being grateful or whatever, or like you said, being an asshole, then it just will quickly spread to the rest.
Or new word, arseholery.
Assholery. All right. So remember that. So, so tell me about like you doing all of this kind of work now in government, and how did that turn into like, or are there any more stages between to where you are now? And
yeah, I've jumped around a lot, bit like an Energizer bunny. So next stage after government was voluntary exit scheme, voluntary redundancy. And I'm running lots of coaching sessions to help people make that big life decision.
Right.
And I'm, got people in a room and I'm saying, think about what you want to do. Do you want to take the voluntary exit? What could you do? Coaching them, starting to dabble in coaching. And on the last day, a woman turned to me and said, can I ask you a question? So imagine this scheme's been running for about a month. I'm just coaching people, tracking, monitoring outcomes. And on the last day when you could express your interest to leave, a woman says to me, Roianne, have you taken your own advice? Oh, no. I hadn't listened to any of the things I was delivering. I was just delivering them.
Yeah, yeah.
So it took a couple of minutes, and then I said, you know what, I'm going to put in my papers. And fortuitously, I had always said, so I'm very close to my dad, and I used to say to my dad, Daddy, when you die, I want to die too.
Yeah.
And he always used to say, no, you don't. You're going to have a life to live. But I'd always known. So my grandfather had passed a few years earlier, and he passed in the same year as my cousin, and it had a profound impact on just my behaviour, my tolerance, and frankly, my level of being pretty rude and obnoxious. So I knew when either of my parents passed, I would need to take time out and work to make sure I wasn't going to get fired. And fortuitously, put the papers in, got the quote, and the envelope lands on my desk as I get a call from my mum saying, your dad's collapsed in Guyana. We're in the UK. He's on his way to hospital. So I said, okay, I'm going to leave now. We need to call the travel agent and make arrangements. I didn't even think. I signed all the paperwork to exit a career that I thought I would do for life, that I'd been there for nearly 13 years. I just signed the paperwork, threw it into the internal post, left. And I was on a flight to Guyana in less than 12 hours. So I didn't internalize the fact that I was about to change my life completely, but it's exactly what I needed to do, because after my dad passed, I then was free. And so I remember going to Antigua where I had family, took my daughter, took like 2 months off to just heal and really feel the feeling of losing him. And then that just created this hunger to do coaching, entrepreneurialism, and that created, I think, the swirl of where I am now. So I started working for charity, doing consultancy, freelancing. I mean, over the years, I have run a business selling shoes called She Is Shoes on Facebook. I do not recommend shoe selling to anyone. It's quite complex, and they give you things like size 3 stilettos. And that's an oxymoron right there, because someone with size 3 feet is probably not wearing stiletto heels. Baking cakes, catering, handmade cards, poetry, started my author journey. Did so many things, actually. It was a lot of fun. Largely wasted the money that I got from voluntary redundancy doing this amazing portfolio career. But every step gave me the skills for who I am now, doing diversity and inclusion, but with a twist. So I'm moving away from the traditional way of doing that, moving into coaching, but with a specific skew on confidence, getting your mojo back or finding it if you never had it. Because one of the things I observed was that loads of life coaches are so boring. And I'm just like, I don't understand how you have the audacity to try to coach someone when you have the most innate life possible, where you've had no hardship, no struggle. And the one thing I don't want to do is feel judged by my coach. So we're not doing that. So for me, I embrace imperfection, embrace flaws, and I want to work with people around that. Write semi-erotic novels as well.
Tell me about that.
So they're based in Guyana, New York, London. And again, it's just finding all the different parts of yourself. So I think my dad dying was the catalyst for congruence. So all the disparate parts of myself that I was, writing erotic literature under a pen name, suddenly everything just came into everything's Roianne. These are all parts of me, and I'm going to work to bring them together. So semi-erotic literature is why not? Like, sex is cool.
Yeah.
All
of us wouldn't be here if it wasn't for sex, right?
Well, yeah, but then again, to be fair, my novels are not just about functional sex for procreation. They're a lot nicer than that. They're very salacious, to be honest. I get very positive feedback about my novels. Let's just say 50 Shades of Grey had nothing on me. And to me, it's just all about self-expression. And it was me also finding my version of feminism. Because Guyana, as you know, is super patriarchal society. But I mean, in our lifetime, women could not have a passport unless their husband signed their passport form. I don't even know if you know that, because men don't tend to need to know that.
No.
So super patriarchal. I don't, I'm kind of like, screw the patriarchy. And I think every moment of my life has been the epitome of screw the patriarchy, one way or another. And the novels are part of that journey of reclaiming sexuality. There's nothing shameful about sex, and I think a lot of the messaging is skewed around sex and women and their role in it. So I'm here to kind of free the shackles for all women.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. So now you've written novels, and you've done all these bits and pieces of work in these areas, all these different areas. What do you think? I guess this bit now is like, what do you think about what's happening now in the world? Right? Probably the thing that you're most looking for, or at least what I'm looking for, is the DE&I stuff. What do you think is happening in that space? What's going on?
So I think that my profession, and I use that loosely because a number of the people who work in this space are not DEI professionals, they're charlatans, and they are not worth the paper and they write their CVs on.
Why is that? Sorry,
because they're not qualified. Just so I hasten to add to people, I don't do DEI because I'm a black woman. I do DEI because I've got a master's in business and HR, which means I understand businesses. I'm a chartered accountant, so I understand how to audit any process and find the flaws in it. I'm very good at risk management, and DEI is a risk, a business risk, and you fix that business risk by running change programs. And I'm a really successful program and project manager. I've been a communications advisor, and I bring all of those skills, financial acumen, to how to drive and solve a business problem. And DEI is just a business problem. Instead, you have a lot of people who come at it from, I come from a certain group, so I'm going to advocate for my group in the most uninclusive way possible. I'm going to scare the bejesus out of everyone just to get them to submit. And that's what I think is happening. And what worries me is the polarization, that the actual profession of inclusion has actually created more polarization and exclusion, because too many people are coming at it from the perspective of their own lived experience, not from the fact that it is an issue for society, business and politicians to fix, and how do we do that in the most dispassionate way possible. So one of my biggest worries is, and I try to get people to have better conversations about BEI, is the balance. So big conversations grappling with now are religion and belief and LGBTQ rights. Now in Europe, those rights are equally protected by legislation. And so when I remember being in a government policy role when those regulations were being drafted and they came down, and I was one of the policy advisors who had to think about what, if they were enacted, what would it mean? And one of the key risks I identified is, how do you ever balance between LGBTQ rights and religion and beliefs? If you make them equal, that's a zero-sum game. You could, there'll always be that tension, and it was decided that the legislation would be put in place and we would depend on case law to set the precedent that we would follow. We still don't have clear precedent. And that was, oh my gosh, 2000? Can't even remember the year, it's that long ago. But those regulations have been around for a long time. They've now been enacted in the Equality Act. We still don't have defining precedent case law that tells us what the answer is, because it's so nuanced. And I see that flaring up more and more and more. And I think I see a lot of decisions to dumb down Christianity. So I'm historically Catholic and Church of England and Anglican. And what I see is a watering down of Christianity just to appease other groups. And I think if you look at a lot of businesses, social media, they won't say Merry Christmas, but they will celebrate Holi, Pagwa, Diwali, Ramadan, Eid. That's problematic. Where's the balance? And I think that's what we lose a lot, is the balance. And maybe that is coming from Guyana too, where we celebrate all religions.
We do.
You know, we play Pagwa together. Diwali, we're all out lighting diyas. We're following the motorcades. When it's Eid, we celebrate together. We fast together. We do iftar. When it's Christmas time, we come together to enjoy Christmas. So maybe because we come from such a truly multicultural and accepting and celebratory version of this, I find it really difficult to not see the balance. So I think balance is a huge risk in the EEI. I think as well, people don't look at it properly. When George Floyd was murdered, people lunged into the black conversation. And it wasn't sustainable. And I said that from day one. I said, this is a limited time focus on black issues. It's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be long term, because it's much more complex than something we can fix with a few performative social media posts and a few performative actions. And we've seen it happen again. But part of it is that identity is complex. I write sometimes for Guyanese papers. They'll call me and ask me to do a feature. And because I've written about black women at work and I talk about feminism, and I was running a network in Guyana that was doing charitable work for women and girls, they asked me to sometimes write pieces, especially for International Women's Day. And they asked me to change one of the pieces because I talked about being a black woman, and they said, but you're not a black woman. And it's very confusing for Guyanese people to have you call yourself a black woman, because my grandmother's Indian, my father's mixed with Amber Indian. How do I'm not, at home people tend to call me Dougla, which is our word for biracial Indian and black, So the newspaper said, can you change that? Because it just won't land. They'll look at you. And I don't think I was really that conscious of that differing identity, because I've always largely identified as black. But then I've got Guyanese friends who are Guyanese second generation who live here, and they say to me, oh, it's so funny when you call yourself black, because they see themselves as black and they just don't see me as fully black. So identity is so complex as well. So when you even use words like black, what does that actually mean? I use it for ease, but if we deconstruct that, what does it actually mean? It was a political term for non-white. But how did we end up still holding that label for some people while other people didn't have it? And like I said earlier, I'm Guyana. Guyanese all day, every day. That is my central identity, which is much more multicultural than that.
Yeah. Well, there's so much material there, Roianne. Like I wouldn't even know where to start as well, because the what you talk about is kind of quite relevant to how I feel like about myself as well. So over there, nobody will look at me and go, or actually, I even go back to Guyana sometimes, like recently, and I said, oh, I'm Guyanese, and people are like, oh, really, are you? Yeah, but I say, yes, I am. And then they go, okay, so where are you from? And then, it goes down a whole kind of rabbit hole of me trying to explain everybody who's had sex with each other and which ones they came from. Right? So, it's difficult to explain, but like you said, the main thing is that I do feel Guyanese, but at the same time, I realize I'm also British, at least here, because this is where I've placed my home. It's where I have my kids, and I am there I am, right? It's nobody else to describe who I am. So I think I'm both at the same time, and I can be. That's what I feel like. But yeah, when it comes to what's going on now, like, and when you're talking about the DE&I stuff, what do you think are like the really burning issues, apart from the ones that we're seeing on the surface of what the media is telling us? Like, is there anything else underneath it that's driving it?
Yeah, and underneath is the biggest problem is, if you think of DEI, you think immediately, I'm not allowed to say that. You can't say that.
And that's the same thing with the BAME thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, BAME. I love the BAME conversation. But everything is framed in negative. When you think of DEI, there's nothing celebratory about it. People aren't talking about what opportunities, the innovation you get when people come into things from a different perspective. And so what's happened is there's now a seething resentment that burns. But people aren't talking about it because many companies have policies about what you're allowed to say. And if the line is at an 8, most people assume the line is at 10. One of the things I experience quite regularly in conversations is I'll say, I want a really diverse group of people. And then go, so you just want black people? I don't think I said that. But interesting that that's where you went with it. And so I think there's so many assumptions that people make when you open your mouth. Brené Brown talks about the story I tell myself, and we're all telling ourselves stories. And how do we unlock the space where we put our stories on the table? So I try in, all of my relationships, interactions with people, to say how I'm feeling. Or to say, look, I am feeling as if you said something offensive. I'm feeling offended by that. Can you say more? So put it on the table and give the person the opportunity to clarify. I mean, they might clarify and say, yeah, I did say that. But at least then you know what you're dealing with. Because I always say I love a good racist. Love a good racist. Straight in my face racism. I know how to deal with that. It's the people behind your back who are creating chaos, who are creating sub-stories about you, all the subterfuge. I don't do well with that. I'm a super direct person.
And you find, just coming back to touch the point that you just mentioned just now, which is that when you set like a barrier / benchmark of you can't say anything above this or whatever, people will try to push up to that level, but just stay on that side of it.
No, they do worse. They say what they want, but to a select group of people.
All right.
And that's worse, because that means you've got leaders who are infecting the minds of more junior staff, because the junior staff don't always feel that they can push back against that narrative or rhetoric. You've got people who are saying one thing but doing something different, which is also risky in an organization. From an ethical point of view, leaders should always be on the same page, but in many organizations you end up with factions. All of that is deeply unhealthy, because all of that energy could be driving profit. So this is why this is a business problem. It's not a personality problem. I mean, sometimes I do say, in order for me to have a personality clash with someone, they have to have a personality, and that's not always comparable. But, you know, that's what the problem is that people don't necessarily push the line because they don't care that the line's there. It's more that they then infect other people with their perspective, which I think is the problem.
Got it. So, all this stuff is probably going to go away anyway with the advent of AI, right? Is that going to happen?
Definitely not. So I think AI it's fascinating, and I'm still playing with AI a little bit because, firstly, junk in, junk out. Mm-hmm. You code junk in, junk's going to come out. So you code bias in, then, you know, we saw there was a whole study around driverless cars and how they recognize human beings. But most of the images of human beings that they put into the code were white people. Mm-hmm. So the cars were able to recognize white people, but not able to recognize people of color because enough images hadn't been put in.
Right, yeah.
So AI is just a function of human bias and human behavior. So there's one thing. I also, funny enough, I was talking about AI and the HR profession as well, because I play around with, I can't remember the name of the app where you ask, people say it's ChatGPT, but it's not, it's something else, it's cheaper. And I put in questions, so I'm like, what do you think of courage? And then it gives me the whole stupid answer. It says, I am artificial, I cannot think for myself. Okay, yeah. Thanks for the preamble. Just tell me what you're thinking. Yeah. And then it still gives me an answer. So it's like, yeah, shut up. I didn't need that. Then it gives me an answer. But then someone said, oh, it's great. You can use it for social media posts. And I think, hold on a minute. If I use this for a social media post, are there like a million other people doing the same thing and getting the same answer? Because what I'm not clear about is whether it has the ability to give like people in different locations slightly different answers. Right.
Like real local personalization.
And also just avoiding duplication and plagiarism.
Got it, yeah. So if it's saying the same thing to you because you're in the same location as me, you're Guyanese, it'll probably give us both exactly.
Yeah, and then suddenly me and you have the same social media post being gurus, but it's exactly the same social media post. Yeah. So I think it's a little risky. And I think it's risky for dumbasses, to be really honest. And I'm almost excited to see how many people will actually out themselves as dumbasses by just reading their social media and then be fighting out that, no, that was AI, it wasn't you. So, I mean, that's like me future-proofing my own entertainment. So I'm watching certain accounts carefully because I think they may be, and I may be about to get the proof that I've always needed.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think AI is interesting from that perspective, but I also think it's a key risk for recruiting. How do I then know that you authentically wrote those insightful paragraphs and it wasn't AI?
Yeah.
And then if you've got substandard recruiters, they're not looking at that and really understanding it. What does it mean for the education sector? What does it mean for assignments? What does it mean for teaching stuff? So I'm excited by it because I'm one of the kids that used to watch Back to the Future. Yeah. So this for me is just, when did we land in the future?
I know.
It's like Marty McFly moments for me. But at the same time, I'm just, will this dumb down our children? That's what I wonder. What is our responsibility as parents to keep stimulating their minds, because it feels like things got easier.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because how do we enable people to still carry on thinking for themselves? And if they're just relying on just saying, hello AI, tell me how to do this, how to do that, will they actually ever know how to do it for themselves?
Yeah.
How to write a story from beginning to an end. Got it. So we talked about AI, DEI, inclusion. What about like the cost of living stuff that's happening at the minute right now? Like, tell me, what do you think about? It just seems like there's a big convergence of things happening all at once with people who had kind of traditionally felt that they might have been in a safe job because they were like in I don't know, working for Google or Meta or whomever. And now these places are all shedding staff. Like even Microsoft are, right? So the massive companies who are producing this technology are also the ones who are releasing people as well from work. And then there's this, again, cost of living crisis thing that's happening as well. What's happening? And like, should we be worried, or how are we, I guess I'm not making much sense. I don't expect you to have the answer for it, but what are your thoughts on it?
So for me, I think this is also a really interesting cultural nuance, because in Guyana, we used to put our hand to anything. So I don't believe in the concept of a safe job. So that's the first thing. I think that if you think you're in a safe job, that you have led a deeply privileged life. And I come from a family, you know, historically, although going to Queen's College, middle class, yes, but my grandmother was a domestic. She was a maid, basically. My grandfather on my dad's side was first generation free from slavery. So what is this safe job thing? That doesn't exist. And it's all about how you turn your hand to what is in front of you and create opportunity. I am not having a Kim Kardashian moment where I say, you just work hard and it's all fine. I'm not saying that to clarify quickly. But what I'm saying is the mindset and the mind shift you have to make around what you need at a given time. So I really believe that the universe gives you what you need, but it might not be what you want and what you desire, and recognizing the difference. So it's as simple as, do you need Kellogg's cornflakes? Is it a want or desire? I need Kellogg's cornflakes, to be clear. But I don't need to cook with Heinz tomato ketchup. So sometimes there are just those shifts that you have to make. But it's also, how do you start to ask yourself harder questions around what are your key skills, and how do you use your key skills to drive economic benefit for yourself? It's also about much more collaboration, community, spirit that I think doesn't exist in this country in the same way. You know, we come from a country where most people have their little garden, you know, they grow in their little garden, and you've got some squash or some okra or something growing. And if I've got okra and you've got pak choy, I might say, Robert, give me some pak choy, and we're going to do a swap. That mentality is not widely applicable in societies like the UK, the US. How do we start to change that mindset? How do we start to truly see ourselves as citizens of the world and citizens of a bigger system than ourselves? I think these societies are very individualistic. And at times like this, that's why there's such a big squeeze, because everyone's fighting for themselves. And because in Guyana, we don't even have electricity on a, you know, necessarily all the time.
Yeah.
But you can phone a friend, and you can go by your friend who's got a generator, because it's just embedded in us that it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
And we say something, hand wash hand, but can come clean.
Yeah.
And that means I can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And so I think the answer lies in togetherness, because alone you're only ever going to get so far.
Yeah.
But the bigger question, and I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, is the system's not designed to encourage collaboration and community, because power in numbers, right?
Yeah.
And we also haven't learned lessons. You know, I always laugh, Guyana's political system is, again, hardly any barriers to entry. To be a presidential candidate back home, I think you need 2 people to agree that you have what it takes to run the country.
Should we join Ticket? Right?
Yeah, we should. We should. Like, I'll sign you off.
You be president.
Yeah.
I can be prime minister.
And but what is interesting though is, because of that proximity to politics, actually I think that the electorate can make better decisions. So I always use Brexit as an example of, there were key things that I was a Remain person, I was clear about that. We could have done things differently. That vote was very close. One of the things I said was, if we had done basket of goods, which I learned in Guyana, retail price index, basket of goods.
RPI, yeah.
Imagine if you had just said, today we are part of the European Union. Here are the 20 things you buy, your baked beans, your ketchup, your bread. Here's 20 things you buy and here's how much they cost. Here's how much they're going to cost when we leave the European Union because of tax levies, different trade agreements that we're going to have to make. Here's how much basket's going to cost. Still fancy voting?
Yeah.
That's how you talk to the normal people.
Yeah.
Full page spread in all of the free newspapers that you can get in every big major city, that vote would have been different.
Not any of the kind of lies about 350,000 or whatever new hospitals or something like that.
Yeah, well, and then the other one I used was, I remember on the morning of the vote, a really close family member called me and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to vote. And they said to me, oh, what are you voting? And I said, I'm going to take a seat because what do you mean, what am I voting? I didn't know that anyone in my family wasn't thinking Remain. And they said, well, you know, these immigrants are taking our jobs. I said, what, immigrants like us? Because we were the immigrants before.
Yeah.
And I said, and what jobs are they taking? Like, were you planning to build a house anytime soon or do any of the menial tasks that we tend to force immigrants to do, regardless of their educational background? Because our system is stacked against you if you're not British. And I said, let me give you an analogy. I invite you and Fred for dinner at my house. Fred is vegetarian, so I cook all vegetarian food. You come in and see loads of vegetables and you start cursing out Fred and telling him to leave. Whose fault is it? I'm the host. I'm the one who's responsible. It's not Fred. That's what this vote is about, is punishing Fred when actually the conversation has to be with the politicians that created the policies that you now feel are disadvantaging you. But Fred was just coming here because Fred got invited. Fred hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
As far as I know, they didn't leave for the vote to leave.
Oh,
but those are the things that, I mean, the system, for whatever reason, isn't set up to empower the man and the woman and the person in the street. It's not set up like that. And until we start to challenge the system through collaboration, through conversations, we're going to end up always the victim of one crisis or another.
So you're saying in a roundabout way that we need to stand together as communities of, even as of individuals, but as communities of people who are capable of thinking for ourselves, but having one common voice about something. Yeah. Right, and having a stance on it. Good, got it. I see it now. I didn't see it before, but I see it now, and I see like how you're right in saying that the system doesn't want that to happen necessarily, because then that poses a problem for them to be able to control whatever you were thinking, etc. And you, I mean, everybody in the country.
It's the Matrix.
It is the Matrix, isn't it? So yeah, that's really interesting, Roianne. So we covered AI, we covered cost of living, we covered D&I. So tell me a little bit about like well-being and what do you think about what's happening now with everybody having a big focus on it? Because on the one hand, it seems like there's different messages coming out from the world of work. The first is come into work, you know, Monday to Friday, because we want you back in the office so that we're making use of all the space that we're renting at a really expensive space and whatnot. But then we want you to have well-being. So that means that, you take care of yourself, etc., etc. And how is that squaring up with all of this stuff happening with, again, all the AI bits and pieces that are coming that are making people think, oh shit, I really need to do what the boss is asking me to do, to like show up for work and work twice as hard in order so that I keep my job, so that AI doesn't replace me. Well-being, that's what's happening there.
So I'm a convert on the well-being thing, because like I think Guyanese culture, work hard, play hard. We're used to burning the candle at both ends. We're used to studying late into the night, waking up, going
In
to
candlelight.
classes. Yeah, like in candlelight, yeah, literally
Burning
in
the candle.
candlelight, studying till like 1 or 2 a.m., back up and in class at 6:30. That was normal
Yeah.
for us. So that long hours culture was normal. So on some level, I didn't get the whole well-being thing. I was like, look at them, weaklings. Look at them. The world is for the fit and the strong, like me.
Yeah.
And then I had burnout last year, and that pulled me up in my tracks, because like I'm Superwoman. How did I get to a point where I just had to stop completely for 4 weeks?
You got kryptonite.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
It's very disappointing. Very disappointing to discover. And I think that shifted. So I think I'd started to lightly look at this well-being thing, make a couple of decisions. Like, I'm quite open. I had weight loss surgery last year. That was a preemptive self-care and well-being move. So I think I've slowly come to this. But I think what it is most people think of it as a big shift. So they think, I've got to go to the gym and lose 100 pounds or do something. And that's like saying to someone who doesn't even really walk to get the remote control, you're going to climb a mountain. And it feels just insurmountable. So for me, it's how do you inject moments of self-care? And to me, it also makes the moments of joy and purpose. Inject the moments into your everyday life instead of looking for the big goal. Because I think the big goal you can always tell yourself, don't do it today. It's tomorrow. It's too big. I'm too busy. But then you argue, how do you build it into your day-to-day? So for me, the challenge is everyone should challenge themselves to give themselves 10 minutes. That is their gift to themselves every day. And those 10 minutes actually can recharge many people's batteries, because you're doing it proactively, not reactively. 10 minutes will not fix burnout, as I learned. But 10 minutes a day, when you are well, can help you. And I think that from an organizational perspective, if you're an organization that wants your people in, you have to make sure your house is in order. You have to make sure that people aren't experiencing microaggressions when they come into the office. So you have to make sure that it's a welcoming culture. You have to make sure that aesthetically it's an environment that people want to be in. I'm a huge fan of plants now. I've learned how to not kill them, because I could kill a succulent.
Fake plants work anyway?
No, because I don't find them pretty enough. So fake plants don't work for me. But I don't know what's happened, but I can now cultivate plants. I've got about 10 plants that are growing and thriving, including not fine leaf thyme, tick leaf thyme, which is a type of plant we have in Guyana, which is called Colombian basil. If you're ever trying to find to grow it yourself in this country, it's apparently Colombian basil. And I've got a load of thriving plants. And I think part of it is, they say talk to plants. And I read somewhere, name your plants after yourself as a way to show yourself self-care and to remind yourself. And when I thought, that's a great idea. So all my plants have a derivation of my name. And so when you talk to the plant, it's like you're doing affirmations. And I'm a big fan of affirmations as well. So you're saying to the plant, you're going to be okay, girl. I see you wilting. Yeah. Let me pour water on you. But also, because you start to identify with the plant, like I've got a lemon plant that I'm so proud of.
Yeah.
Because I grew it from a seed in a lemon, like went on YouTube, put 16 seeds out, only one actually is now a tree. Yeah. And I love that plant as much as my children.
Yeah.
And I just see the leaves wilted and I'm like, girl, come back to me. And I remember being in New York for work and then remembering I hadn't set up the automatic water for the lemon plant. No. And I was like, I may have just killed the plant. And I ran into the house from the airport and she was looking a bit wilty. And I was like, water, coffee grapes. And then she came back, but it was also a good reminder that anytime I see that plant wilting, I take a moment and check in with myself.
Yeah.
So I've created that connection. So I'm so grateful. And it's probably like a random meme on Instagram.
Yeah.
So well-being is about the moments. It's about the environment you cultivate, because that greenery means so much to me.
Yeah.
Maybe because as well, cultivate what means something to you. Greenery is important because we're from Guyana. Plants,
Yeah.
abundance and greenery.
Yeah.
So well-being, your environment should cultivate what makes you feel good and at home.
Yeah.
And then also build in a couple of minutes, 10 minutes a day for self-care and being intentional. So intentional decisions I make is I take my son to school and I walk home. That's a 46-minute walk. But it's built into my schedule now. My calls, meetings don't start until after, and I've built in time to get home, have a cup of tea, breathe, and then start. So there's a lot about intentionality in well-being, and I firmly believe that having a higher purpose and knowing, finding why you exist. And apparently Mark Twain wrote in one of his books that the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you figure out why you were born. And I think that's so powerful, because I know that part of my legacy is to help people find confidence. Is to tell the stories that aren't being told as well. Is to give voice to the people who don't necessarily know how to articulate their story as well. And finding that purpose and knowing that I'm on this earth for a bigger reason than myself.
Yeah.
I think also, I call it soul food. Feed to my soul.
Yeah. 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 I've got to say, I really love that, the thing that you do with the plants, because not only is it like good for well-being, it's also a sustainable thing as well. It's good for the planet. Like if everybody had a tree that they spoke to and they treated it like themselves, we might not be in the situation that we're in right now. Yeah. So I really like, that should be a thing that you do, Roianne. That's like, maybe that's your thing.
Take plants around to people.
No, get people to learn how to treat these plants like they're treated.
Maybe I'll do that as part of my coaching practice.
Yeah.
It's like send people a plant as part of their induction.
Yeah.
With me is send them a plant.
Yeah.
So plant sponsored by Robert Lee.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, you never know. So the most notable thing that I remember hearing about you in terms of social media and stuff like that was when you spoke at the House of Commons. Tell me a little bit about that.
So that was a showcase of women of coloured voices run by a wonderful woman, RuPaul, and her business partner. And they bring together for International Women's Day women of colour and voices and stories of women of colour, because largely and historically our voices aren't centred in the same way. And there was a process where you had to send your story in and then be selected. So I was selected, which is kind of exciting. And I wrote about The Trusted Black Girl, which is the first book I wrote about Black women in the workplace. And I wrote a speech around how do we take responsibility as Black women? How do we join with other women of colour as well? And then how do we ask white women to be part of our journey? So looking at the pecking order, and also how do we call white men into this and give them accountability and ask them to partner with the women of colour in their lives to drive change for us as a group. It was daunting because you had a very set amount of time. And I'm not someone who writes speeches and delivers speeches. I tend to know what I want to say, and then I freestyle, and I usually ask someone in the audience to give me a wave when I'm like 1 minute out, and then I rap. So being in a space where I've got none of those things I usually use, I've got a tight time, and I'm having to read from notes. And I remember once when I used to present, when I started presenting using notes, and my mentor said, that was awful. He said, when you read notes, you lose all of your personality. You're just really stiff. You're like a robot, like, So I was super nervous about how do I inject my personality when I do have to read the notes, because I've got a very tight time. So not as enjoyable behind the scenes as I think it comes across. But that then impacted, that had career changes for me, career implications. It meant, people were talking to me about the book. I got the opportunity to speak about the book in more platforms, do more podcast interviews. It gave me the kind of impetus to write a follow-on book to it a few years later, to really use my voice on social media, because I think storytelling is one of the tools that I had. And also it just really confirmed that I am a good speaker. And again, not everyone is a good speaker, and a lot of the feedback I get is that I speak about things in a way that's different to the norm. And so I think it just reinforced the confidence I already had. But I mean, it's easy to be innately confident, but that experience told me that, yeah, I love what I say, but actually other people do too, which is quite important if you want to monetize it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I definitely think everybody here probably agree that, in terms of the way how you speak, Roianne, it just comes across so well. Turning a little bit to Guyana right now. I guess I would go with probably the most immediate thing off of the back of yesterday or 2 days ago, or 3 days ago. The weekend was the Madia thing. So tell me, do you know about what's happened over there, or do you just know just what's been reported in the media?
So I know what's been reported in the media, but I've got some very strong opinions on it. So fire breaks out, dormitory, 19 children killed. That is awful. As a mother, I cannot imagine, even imagining the pain feels unbearable of losing a child. But then I turned to this, it was set by a student. And that then reminds me that in 1998 or 97, Queen's College was, a big portion of it was burned down by a student. So it took me right back to the night when I saw the sky turn red, because what people don't understand is if you live in Georgetown, everything is very proximate. And I lived in a 3-story building on the top floor. And I remember the sky was red. And I didn't know for about an hour that was my school burning down. And I didn't know that emotionally it would throw me off kilter. And it would feel like a bereavement to see, the charred remains of a whole wing of our school was one of the things that I'll never forget.
Yeah, I remember that.
But so it reminded me of that. But then I started to read more into the story. And so a couple of things that I think we have to take responsibility for is I have for a long time said that the media reported in Guyana is irresponsible, and we need better legislation and regulation for media outlets, because there is a good chance that young woman learned how to set that fire, because years ago we reported in detail how to set a fire as part of our journalistic storytelling. We go into too much detail and we create how-to guides. It's why we have such a high suicide rate, because they tend to talk exactly about how people have taken their own life. So if I'm thinking about it, I can open a paper and usually find the answer to nearly every crime. We could usually find the answer in our papers. So I think journalistic integrity is part of the problem here. Then just reading more is the caretaker locked the girls in to make sure that they didn't go out at night. And I understand that from a cultural point of view. We don't trust our young people alone. And lack of trust has severe consequences, and we just found that. And it saddens me that why don't we talk to our young people more? Why don't we find that if they are running away at night or getting away or doing things, what's driving that? How can we use words to get through to them because locking them away, we've just proved, is the worst thing possible. So there's so many underlying points of sadness and disappointment, as well as just the grief that so many young people's lives have been snuffed out as well. And the survivors, their lives have changed, and I just hope to God their lives are over, because this is a kind of event. You know, the caretaker who lost her son, I think he was 5, as well, in the fire. How will she feel living without her son, and also knowing that one of the actions she took, which is to close the door, may have had such a profound impact? How will the student who was upset because they confiscated her mobile phone, apparently she set the fire because of her mobile phone, and then that was linked to apparently a relationship she was having with an older man. I mean, it's just a tangled web, and we need counselling, we need really good mental health support for all of the survivors, for everyone touched by that story. We need that. We need to understand how we start to shift our education system to be more empowering of young people, which is against our cultural norms. But how do we start to shift those cultural norms now so that young people can talk about what's going on, rather than these draconian measures? So she's having a relationship with someone, you take her phone. Curious to know what the conversation was, though, that underpinned that action. And by no means am I doing this from knowing all the answers. I have a teenager, I know, read Miss Dissent, and sometimes you lose objectivity and you go right back to the core of who you are, which is, you know, Guyana, speak when you're spoken to, I'm going to beat you.
Yeah.
I am the ultimate and supreme being. This is not a democracy.
Yeah.
You know, all of those messages have been uttered in my house.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying this from a point of being better than anyone.
Yeah.
It's just from profound sadness. And also, it could have been me, it could have been, you know, it could have been any of us, because that was our blueprint of how you deal with it.
I found that there's, like you said, so many levels of anger at varying degrees with everyone. So there was even a potentially like a racial element to it as well. But the fact that it happened in the hinterland regions where predominantly most of the people that were affected were Amerindians. There was, like you said, the fact that there's a lack of trust with this young girl. And we don't know whether or not she committed it or whatever. All these haven't been officially done. But like you said, there's almost like ready right now a trial by media where bits and pieces of the stories are being pieced together and everybody now has an opinion on it. But I think the other thing as well is just that, it's 19 kids, and in any other place in the world, like I can't remember, was it the Malaysia thing where the kids got trapped underneath the football team? Yeah. And it's such, Elon Musk got fucking involved in that, right? Yeah, for a football team of kids who got stuck in somewhere. But these children weren't stuck in somewhere because somebody made a silly idea to walk them into a cave. They got locked up. Yeah. They got locked up. That's, like you said, this poor woman as well. Now she's lost her own child in the process. It's like the worst case of shit happening.
Yeah.
Worst case. So I guess the key thing though is now I was looking at some of the images and I started to get angry for a bunch of different reasons, for all sorts of different reasons. Like people were, consoling people from political parties and all sorts of things. And I was like, they didn't lose their children, right? And then I was thinking about it from the Amerindian perspective. And I was like, is there a racial element to this whole thing? And then afterwards I was thinking, is it because they're poor as well? Because they won't have the money to afford all of the lawyers to then go and figure out who is to blame. Right? Will anybody step up to support them? all of these kinds of things kept going through my mind. So I was just, I started to get angry at every single point. And then you said about the whole cultural thing as well. Yeah, are we that stupid enough to go lock our kids away without a flipping fire exit for them to escape if something happens?
And that's basic infrastructure. It's also, we're very proud wooden structures. Has the time come for us to have a wholesale review of at least public buildings?
Yeah.
Why is, and on one level, yet it was burning wooden structure. They were able to get into the building to get more people out because it's wooden. But why is it wooden? What infrastructure changes do we need to consider at this point? How do we get the funding to build in these communities? How do we build trust in the communities? How do we also get the infrastructure to go into these communities? Why is it, after all these years, there aren't still easy access between towns and the hinterland? Like, we're beyond that now in terms of technology. It's not hard to build a road these days.
Yes. Well, speaking of building and stuff like that, Guyana's obviously a bit flush with money as well. So, and in terms of how, what that's bringing to the country, what are your thoughts on it? Like with the oil revenues kicking in and coming in, what are you hearing on the ground from the diaspora? What are people saying that you talk to back home?
I'm hearing lots of there's money, but I don't think it's kicking in. I think,
Where is it?
It's like for me, where is the money going? Because I feel like the country was much more thriving when there was a huge black market in narcotics. It felt like a more thriving economy. Also, I just question, how are we preparing the infrastructure for this money in terms of how do we negotiate environmental clauses into any deals? We've got lots of foreign countries coming. We know that when you remove oil, you're displacing, tectonic plates. There's a couple of risks that come from drilling deep into the depths of the earth for a country that's also already below sea level.
Yeah.
I would love more transparency about what have we done to look at the long-term environmental impacts and what mitigating action and what investment will we make. What responsibility do the oil companies have, 10 years down the line? What lessons have we learned from our gold mining scandal, frankly, on the environment? Not clear that we have. Generally, just more transparency would be great. More ability to do business in Guyana. One of the hardest things to do in Guyana is open a bank account.
Well, the other hard thing that I've heard is that even if you have opened a bank account, your money kind of goes missing sometimes.
Oh yeah, if you don't make any transactions for like a year, or if you don't withdraw. So I know someone who's putting money in, not withdrawing, and they still said that was in contravention of the rules, and so closed the account and took the money.
Wow.
And so there's all of those infrastructure challenges, but also because over the years, before the pandemic, I was trying to do business in Guyana and establish kind of part of my company there. And it's little things like, why do we still have paper records? Why aren't files electronic? It means it's harder for us to do things like have external companies come to do capacity and capability building. And then we're also a very prideful country. So, you go in, and I get this all the time, and I remember launching my women's network, which was a charitable, and I did a launch event that was free to attend in Guyana. And a number of our classmates were in the audience, classmates from bishops as well as saints, all the schools, the network is wide. So a number of them came out to support me. And then there were some people from different organizations, women's organizations, who didn't know me, whispering things like, who is she? Is she even Guyanese? Or are these foreigners coming? And then my friends in the audience have to then credential me. No, she's Guyanese, she went to school here. This is where her family's from. And there's that tension if you return, that somehow you should have no opinion if you don't live in Guyana.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be allowed to engage in business if you don't live in Guyana.
Yeah.
But the skills aren't there necessarily. And
Neither the experience, because the skills come from the
experience.
experience.
Absolutely. And also just how to manage a global relationship and that cultural awareness of how things are done here and how you have that conversation. Language patterns even could be different, you know. Unconsciously, I think I've said more Guyanese slang today than I have maybe in the past year because I'm with you. So it comes to the fore. But how do we manage that? That wouldn't happen if I was in a corporate environment right now.
Sure. And how do we encourage young Guyanese, especially women? We've hired one a few weeks ago, just to be more Roianne, right? I'm literally saying this right now. Coming up and saying things that they need to engage with and be proactive in the way how they have discussions with people versus just being quite quiet, demure, you know, sitting in the back, the patriarchy thing. I don't want that. I want people who think, right? Think and know things for themselves. That's actually, was it the Latin know for yourself or know yourself, right? So, yeah.
And I think that's, I guess, where coaching people comes in, but then you have to understand and believe in the philosophy of coaching and mentorship. And that even that isn't something that people really take on in Guyana. So I coach virtually and people are very reticent about even investing in themselves. So invest in a coach, talk to me, let me help you navigate. Because for me, it's find your own authentic voice. Because it's really obvious when you're trying to emulate someone versus figure out what you're passionate about, speak up about what you're passionate about. For God's sake, don't speak up about things you're not passionate about because you're probably going to sound like an idiot.
Yeah.
But kind of test that in a safe environment. And, you know, but Guyana has a kind of copycat economy as well. So a lot of the ideas I had to take there, other people kind of heard about them, then introduced them locally. And then I'm not competitive like that because that only devalues it for everyone who's trying to access the service. Now there's like 10 providers. But again, people don't necessarily have the skills, but they're starting businesses in things, which is also a huge risk as well. So there's a lot to break through, and I think if the government want to change it, they have to go to the diaspora and open up opportunities for special advisors in a really fair and transparent way. I'm not asking for nepotism, but I think we should have a proper process of special advisors, clear remuneration, clear in kind benefits if that's the case, if we don't want to make it totally transactional. But I think that they need to launch a program where people like you and me who want to help build the country genuinely can do that without having to navigate every conversation ourselves, without being insulted along the way, because after a while you get tired and you just opt out of it. Like, we've got big things that we're doing here.
We got other things that we do, exactly. So Roianne, thank you so much for your time today and all of the wonderful insight that you brought to us, basically, and everything that you've shared. I'm sure lots and lots of people will probably have lots of comments and opinions about, which is great, because that's what we need to do. We need to be a lot more engaging with the communities that we're part of, whether they're in the UK or whether they're abroad. So thank you once again.
Thank you for having me. It's been nice to catch up.